Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation and glad to be here. What I'm going to do now is share my screen. All right. So the presentation today will be on the dangers of aestheticized education. And before that, let's talk about what that means and what it means for our world today and the future. So first, what is it? Uh, in a few words, aestheticized education places undue emphasis on the visual and aesthetic aspects of learning. In other words, it focuses on making things look pretty and on checking going through a checklist of what you're supposed to do instead of, let's say, following your curiosity or unscheduled learning. So for an example, that's like the opposite of this is a lot of scientists and thinkers and entrepreneurs in the past. They've achieved a lot of discoveries, not necessarily by going to a professor and asking them, okay, what are the things I should learn or that I should follow, or what videos should I watch in order to make the progress? Rather, they just ask. They had the ability to ask and have independent thoughts, and they just went after them. So let's continue moving along. So if you were to go to any college campus today, or high school, or really whatever young people are studying today, it's become fashionable to, let's say, learn chemistry as I have in this picture and make it super pretty and make it colorful and make it, with all these designs. And it makes you, wonder how did this come about? It is actually helping people learn. So when people create these graphics with so much, color and design and aesthetics, they think that it's helping them learn better because it's structured and organized. But that's where the difference comes. Are they actually learning, or are they just, trying to make this pretty? So if you go to any platform today, which is where most people are learning, such as YouTube, and you look up how to study for the medical exam, which, by the way, we can do it right now, and I can show you. So if you go on YouTube, for instance, and let's say how to study for the medical exam, so fairly generic question, and you will see all this, setups and different designs and things like this. Like, for instance, another video here is like how I study for 2 hours a day, and they have this workflows and there's different software to do and to do this and to do that. So you see, you have all this, graphics, and so all this aesthetics to make you think that you're learning, that you're making progress, but it's not necessarily equals to actually learning, equals to actually making progress in science or whatever field you might be in. So a common effect that we've started to see now is that some people, they believe that they can make meaningful contributions to science or machine learning or biology or whatever field they're in simply by reading a few papers or books or even graduating from college. They think that, if I get a PhD, therefore I'll be able to make a certain discovery because I read all the papers, because I did this, because I follow all the syllabus in my classes, because I made all my study notes look pretty. And of course, that's not true. That's not where a lot of the discovery comes from, which, as we've seen in the past, it just comes from this: one, following your curiosity; second, having the ability to have independent thoughts and going with them; and third is sometimes being misunderstood, but having that conviction inside that you think this is going somewhere. And a lot of the time, it actually leads somewhere. where a lot of people didn't think it would lead to anywhere. So one quote that I remember says Einstein, he said, if a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, of what then is an empty desk a sign? So what this quote is basically saying, people were criticizing Einstein. Why is your office so, all over the place and so disorganized and dirty and things like this? And he said, okay, my cluttered desk is a reflection of my mind, right? So if you have an empty desk, all organized and all pretty, like what does that actually say? Does it mean you have an empty brain? You have no ideas. And again, this goes back to where we are right now. So if you go to any college campus today, you will find their desks and the rooms and neatly organized, neatly, like all their notes under, people don't use notebooks anymore. They use iPads. If you see all their notes on their iPads, it's just the prettiest thing in the world. But what is that actually a sign of? Is it a sign of learning? Is it a sign of making progress and just actually learning, or just a sign of just being good designers? Mr. Einstein. So, as I said, there's this huge focus on completing tasks, on presenting this image of productivity rather than engaging deeply with the material. A question of what is the intrinsic value of education, really? And this, of course, diminishes our focus on following your curiosity and from exploration to task completion, which makes you wonder, where's curiosity-driven education today? Does it exist? And in current educational systems, it's not there. So what I made here is just sort of, we can visualize and imagine what's happening today. So we have like the appearance versus the substance. So the appearance, I just made a quick checklist here. So first is perfectly organized notes and study setup. So you focus on aesthetics, the handwriting, you're making sure that you have the right background, you have the right music that you're listening to while you're studying. You usually have these routines and setups on social media, which as I show you on YouTube. You have this strict productivity schedule. So let's say you wake up at 6 a.m. and you study for 3 hours and you do the same sort of things every day. You just memorize information for tests instead of just, asking yourself, okay, how does this connect to the actual world? And you use a lot of shortcuts such as summaries and study hacks. And again, all these things to make you feel and appear more efficient. And the whole purpose of this is to seek external validation. So which this would be grades, so doing well in school, or praise from your peers or teachers, or sometimes even social media feedback as a measure of your success. So a lot of students might make social media posts on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram about how pretty their study setups look like, or how well they did in a test. And as opposed to the substance-driven learning, which is all about deep understanding. So sometimes, you just focus on the messy but meaningful engagement with the subject. So you might ask the question, why is the Earth rotating at the speed it is? And then just going, okay, if from there you ask more questions and more questions and more questions until you find the answers to all of that, as opposed to just opening a physics textbook and just reading all the pages without necessarily asking yourself questions and having those independent thoughts. A lot of it is discussions and with professors and other peers, and you sort of challenge ideas with each other instead of just doing the same thing, which is reading, going to the computer and just watching videos. There's a lot of reflection in the material, so there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of discussion with peers, there's a lot of back and forth. You also connect information with interdisciplinary topics. So you might be learning biology, but then you realize the same ideas could be applied to computer science. If you were following this curriculum, this, a task learning, you would never do that because that's not part of your curriculum. That's not part of what you're supposed to do. And then you apply knowledge practically. Whatever you think it might be useful, you just go and do it, not just passing a test or an assignment. And you measure your success by internal metrics, by intrinsic metrics, which is that intellectual satisfaction that you get, not necessarily that it comes from within, not necessarily from outside you. So the approach to the superficial learning is a lot of these superficial engagement with the content, and there's a lot of taking off tasks without that developing the critical thinking skill. So I thought I will give you one example here. So you have curiosity, learning, and it is curiosity-driven learning is all about deep learning, deep understanding of the topic. So one example is Mary Curie. She spent years working in this small, simple lab driven by her curiosity about radioactivity. She didn't care about how she looked. She didn't care about what people even thought of her. She just wanted to make the discovery, which of course led to some things that without her, perhaps we would have never found. So how can we create more environments to allow more people for her to do some things like this? It's one of the most important questions that we can ask ourselves today. And another example of someone I met this week. So there's a new company called Boom Supersonics. And if you remember the Concorde, which was in the 90s, and the last flight was in 2003, which was the supersonic airplanes. As you may know, the Concorde is not longer a thing. So supersonic was, after 2003, no more supersonic planes. What happened? We were supposed to go to have flying cars and they go faster, and technology was supposed to get better. However, that's not what has happened. So this is where Blake Scholl from Boom Supersonics came about. So he had this idea that why don't we have supersonic planes? So that was back actually 10 years ago, in 2014. And of course, he did not study aerospace engineering. He didn't even do anything airplane related. He always had that passion inside of him. But he went to Carnegie Mellon, where he studied his undergrad in computer science. And he actually was one of the first employees in Amazon. And from there, he actually had a few startups. And in 2014, he had actually sold a software startup that he had, and that he was asking himself, what is the thing that I want to do next? And so what he did was, okay, how can I learn about supersonics? And how does that actually work? And so he had this unscheduled exploration following his curiosity. And that's where he realized that he actually didn't need to invent anything new. He just needed to make it, put certain pieces together to make the company and bring supersonics back. And the company has only barely 10 years and already has contracts with major airlines. And if everything follows to schedule, we should have these planes in today's airlines, such as United, by 2030, which is only 6 years. So again, this is another example that you don't need to go to school or have a PhD in aerospace engineering or whatever you think to do. You can, again, curiosity and just that passion that this gentleman had. And this is the plane, how it would look like. So, curiosity plus exploration is not the same thing as just searching for the satisfaction or completion of education. Blake, from this guy, he had his satisfaction with his own personal curiosity rather than, the other approach he could have taken is that, okay, 2014, let me go take a PhD in aerospace at whatever college. And that would have taken 6 years. So until 2020, and he still wouldn't have made any progress. He would have learned all the things that people would have told him about why it's not possible and why it doesn't make any sense. And if it make any sense, other people would have made it already. And that sort of intellectual traps that people usually fall into. And he would have never made anything. Instead, he just followed his curiosity. He just has on-schedule exploration of learning, and will have, hopefully, supersonics plane in 6 years or less. So those are the benefits and the risks of learning today, which is why it's so important that we ask ourselves these questions. So how do we rebalance like education? So first, we encourage the students to focus on deep curiosity-driven learning over appearance. That's hard to do, right? Because if you're in school, the whole point is that we have these metrics that we grade you on. But how do we show more examples? How do we create a culture where following your curiosity is the given metric, which is like, the cool thing to do, and just sort of encouraging that intrinsic motivation inside of people. So that's where, creating new learning environments that are both, engaging and challenging without prioritizing that aesthetics. And the last thing here is like fostering interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary discussions, which, value and just make and give context to a lot of these questions. So I just had a quick roadmap here that we can, students and educators, use. So the first step is, cultivating curiosity inside of people. So open-ended problems, encouraging questions, and again, interdisciplinary learning, just seeing how everything connects and how, you can learn biology, but if you do that, you can actually make progress in neuroscience or computer science or whatever, political science. Facilitating exploration. How do we promote independent research and the flexibility in learning? Emphasizing active engagement, so creating projects, and just finding ways and mediums to express that curiosity. Analytical skills, of course. So using reflective activities. 5 here, fostering critical thinking. So presenting complex scenarios, encouraging debate. Again, something that has been missing from a lot of modern education, that debates, those later arguments and discussions that led to new ideas between professors and students, and just between students themselves. And again, a lot of feedback between students and the professors and students themselves. And then number 6, applying knowledge creatively, fostering interdisciplinary projects, and really encouraging innovative solutions. And for some reason, there's a lot of limiting beliefs into how a lot of people act to that. Like if I do computer science, I can only do computer science. And as I showed you before, you can do computer science, or you can do physics, or you can do aerospace, and encouraging that and showing more examples that it's actually possible to be interdisciplinary and why it's actually more beneficial to you and to the world and to the whole universe. So I thought, it's important, just to bring some examples from my personal life. So of course, I'm very curious and I like to do all these sorts of things. So last year, I decided to write a book on lithium. So I just had this idea and I didn't really know anything or too much about lithium. So I just decided to teach myself everything about it. So from the science, from the batteries, from how it's extracted, from the properties of lithium, all the chemistry, all the physics. And why did I do that? No one told me to do it necessarily. I just felt like I wanted to do it. And I think this was a good way to do that. You can read, this is available on my website if you'd like to read it. This last December, I watched this movie about this situation in my country, Venezuela. And the movie inspired me a lot. So I decided, okay, how did this person write the movie? What's the background? So I decided to write another book about the movie, how it was made, the cinematography, some of the intellectual explorations from the director, and even the biography of the director himself, how he raised the money, how he did everything. And again, why did I do this? Didn't make any sense. I just spent so much time doing this in December, but I just sort of, you feel it, like so much so that I would, for 3 weeks straight, I woke up at 4 a.m. and I wrote for 4 or 5 hours every day. Why? I don't know, just curiosity was compelled to do this. Another example, my friend and I, we created the UIUC talk show, which became one of the largest college talk shows in the country, which basically we just talk to everyone. We talk to artists, entrepreneurs, scientists, everyone who has interesting stories and interesting ideas to share. And why we can encourage that interdisciplinary ideas and projects and thoughts. And some of the people that we've talked to that you may know, it's Stephen Wolfram or a few Nobel laureates such as Tony Legat. The last project here is that we built a vertically landing rocket, like those SpaceX ones. We just developed a prototype that can land itself. So those are a few examples of how important it is to follow your curiosity, even though all these things are sort of like unrelated. But once you look back, you can see how interdisciplinary they all are. Let's continue moving along. So again, it's really important that we rethink a lot of this aestheticized education. And it looks visually appealing, but it actually poses serious risk to the purpose of education, to the true purpose of learning. And that's why we need to prioritize, substance and not necessarily appearance. We need to fortress curiosity, not necessarily checking lists or even a lot of the education itself. Another example I can think about, just like the Wright brothers, never went to college. One of them, I believe, didn't graduate from high school. And again, they didn't need to do any of that. They just needed to follow their curiosity. They needed to ask, questions. And that's how we're able to create planes and so much of innovation that comes from there. So a recap, a conclusion. Synthesized education is a lot of focus on appearance and external validation. And this is an actual risk to intellectual growth in ourselves, but also in the world as a whole. Task completion overshadows that curiosity-driven exploration and deep understanding. And that's what we need. We need on-schedule exploration, just going into the wild and just seeing what happens. And we need to shift the focus back to genuine inquiry that fosters that creativity. And again, students and educators, they really need to focus on the substance over the superficial engagement. And lastly here, again, how do we create a culture of meaningful exploration that prepares students for that lifelong learning, not just getting a degree, never reading a book anymore, never having an independent thought or question after they finish. And with that, happy to take any questions and continue the discussion. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you for accepting our invitation. I knew that you were gonna make a great presentation, but I didn't know that would be that great. So thank you so much. I really mean that. Thank you so much. Especially when you quoted the word education. I got that message. You may say, I can think that 5,000 years of educational organization that we lived in through history, and tons of books and articles that were read about education. What else can we say about education? Well, at least two things. Both of them are new. One of them is transdisciplinary research, which means to include necessarily the stakeholders. And in education, the principal stakeholders are the student. So why we don't include students in our educational research? Why not? It's unbelievable. Someone told me that the postwell explanation that transdisciplinary research is a new. So let's apply it. The second thing that is relatively new is the second order cybernetics, where scientists don't just make reflection with CT, reflection with regard to the object that they are observing, but they make reflection with X on their own thinking when reflecting. This is a must. This is a necessary condition in second-order cybernetics. And it applies to scientists, and it applies also to any kind of practitioner. There is a book, at least one, a reflexive practice. Any practitioner can should have reflection with X about what he's doing. Each thinker should have reflection about his own thought. This is a metacognitive process to have cognition about our own cognition. So if we combine these new things to apply it to education, we have to apply it to professors, lecturers, and students. Why we are not doing that? Why? We need the reflection with X from the practitioner in education, from educator. And we need the students to have reflection with CT on what they received, to reflect on what they received, but to have also reflection with X about what they think about what they received. So it's not a matter of opinion, as someone told me. No, it's a matter of reflection. This is second-order cybernetics. It's a must. So in transdisciplinary communication, we have a must. We have to include stakeholders. In education, the stakeholder are the student. Well, the principal stakeholders are the students. Why we don't include them in educational research? Why? Let's do it. And I lost the idea. So I don't have the answer to why we are not doing that. I sincerely don't have the answer. So yesterday we had a dialogue with this question, why we are not doing that. It was in English. This afternoon we're going to have the same dialogue in Spanish. And I wish that this dialogue could be done in Chinese, in Japanese, because this is the definition of the second sense of transdisciplinary, beyond disciplines. Beyond disciplines are the society in general. The society in general does not speak all of them English. So we have to do it in the language of each country. How we can get to the parent of the student, which are also stakeholders, if we don't speak the language of the society? So we are trying to do our best to see how we are doing that in English and in Spanish, but we are trying to invite people to do it in other languages, because it's the language of their respective society, which are another stakeholder of the education. The immediate stakeholder are the students.
Right.
After the students are the parents. And after the parent is the society in general. And the society has its culture, it has its language, etc., etc., etc. So this is the dream. I call it dream because I have not enough life left to see it come true. But let's do it. And a great insight I got was from Professor Dr. Sonia Herret, because she's dedicated in her studies and experiment to dialogues between old people and young people. Because both of them can learn from each other. Different realities. So my initial insight was her experiment, what she's doing, in these dialogues. Why we cannot do that? Why we cannot talk with our students? Dialogue. Why we cannot have dialogue with our students? And then write about this dialogue in research article, because the dialogue is one of the means of making qualitative research, or in essays that will be, the opportunity will be available for students and professors and teachers. Research and essays, why not? But the half of the book should be written by students, not just by educator. One way to relate via written paper, students with teachers, as a kind of written dialogue, consequence of the oral, not dialogue, but dialogues. And these dialogues would end up in a written dialogue. Maybe it's a dream, but the way you talk and the way you present it, you are a dreamer. And one phrase that I remember is, let us have dream and pay the cost of making our dreams come true.
Very true.
And you are a young man, and you have a long life, for you, and you're gonna do great things, believe me. Thank you so very much, really.
Thank you for the invitation, just the ability to, and the opportunity to share these
You
thoughts.
provided me the opportunity to talk about what is hurting me for 50 years. It was painful for me when I was teaching. I told my students to go and tell their parents that they are not receiving higher education here. They are receiving higher instruction, which is a mean, not an end in itself.
Right.
And because I used to tell all of them that I learned from them more than what they learned from me. Especially because what they learn from me is in the books. What I learned from my student is not in the books. The same thing happened to me as parents. My kids are a learning source. My students were a learning source. So what I admire in you, that at your age, you did so many things already. So thank you very much for being in our conference. It is an honor to have you in our conference, really. Thank you.
The honor is mine to just be able to learn from everyone. So that's the true honor is mine to be learning and sharing these ideas with everyone.
Yeah, many of the things that I'm telling you are not oriented directly to you, but to the other listeners. Because the other listeners are professors also, and students. We can learn a lot from our students. So even if we don't do it because of them, let's do it because of us, because self-love. Let us learn from them. Why not? Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.